when a pair of French tourists entered the coffee shop. The timid and awkward accountant, Casey Davis, was already seated there. They enjoyed joking, sharing vulgarities in French, confident no one understood them. However, Casey was currently studying French and comprehended every single word. At work, colleagues were disparaging their boss and brainstorming ways to harass him. For instance, suggesting they set his house on fire. But Casey intervened. He warned them against it. The boss's wife had recently given birth, plus Casey had visited the family, and the man was genuinely decent. This did not boost Casey's popularity among his co-workers. Casey was even too shy to purchase men's magazines, so he had photocopied pages from one he found belonging to a colleague. One night, the man realized he was out of dog food and drove to the store. Motorcyclists pulled up beside him and asked if he was armed. On his way back, a biker gang surrounded him and severely beat him. The motorcycle bandits had committed another assault, sending Casey to the emergency room. Now he fears leaving his apartment, which is why he hasn't been to work in ages. Another bag of kibble ran out, and this time Casey refused to go out. During dinner, Casey watched a news segment where a man resolved a conflict with an adversary using a firearm. The men's magazine also contained articles about weapons, so the following day, he visited a gun shop to purchase a pistol for self-defense. However, Casey had to wait a while for the clerk to process his paperwork. The salesman immediately warned him that in altercations, the armed person is more often the one who dies. A gun owner frequently shoots himself, not an aggressor. Walking home, Casey passed a karate academy, felt intrigued, and stepped inside. The sensei was instructing his students. They once learned to speak words, but he would teach them to communicate with their fists and feet. Casey was impressed and immediately inquired if he could join the class. Of course, especially since the initial lesson was complimentary. A woman named Anna also works at the dojo, teaching karate to children. She demonstrates to the youngsters how a roundhouse kick can shatter an opponent's jaw. Anna summoned a chubby boy, wrapped her arm around his neck, and choked her student until he passed out. Rule number 9. Tap or nap. The kid should not have forgotten it. Casey awkwardly approached the instructor. The newcomer had violated rule number 1, entering the mat wearing shoes. With his uniform and belt, Casey entered the locker room. Two half-dressed men were practicing moves while a third observed them. Henry offered to tie our hero's belt. He possessed a blue belt, a mid-level rank. There were also stripes for achievements. The red stripe, like Anna's, denoted that she, like the sensei, was an instructor. Black stripes were reserved for the elite. The sensei often spoke of a great master in a red gi. He preferred to incorporate techniques from other disciplines into karate. Rule no. 10. If it works, use it. Today, Casey was paired with Kenneth, a purple belt with a black stripe. His partner immediately landed a full-force kick on Casey, and the sensei reprimanded him. You shouldn't hit that hard during the daytime class. Casey's kick, however, was more of a clumsy flail. Kenneth advised him not to flinch when taking a blow, telling him to imagine his torso was kicking his opponent's leg. Casey enjoyed the lesson and decided to continue his training. When filling out the application, Casey chose not to reveal that he was there because he had been attacked. There was a special room in the building that newcomers were forbidden to enter. The sensei emerged from it with a belt and a uniform. The belt was sacred and must not be lost. If it was, a replacement would cost $15. Now Casey constantly wore his gi around the house. The gun store called him. Casey could pick up his pistol tomorrow, but the man declined. He had chosen a different path. But Casey could still pick up the gun anytime within the next 6 months if needed. In class, the karate students demonstrated their battle cries. Casey received praise. From then on, he trained rigorously and mastered the martial art. At home, he watched kung fu movies. His despised boss called Casey hadn't been to work in 2 months, and the manager had even paid for a week of his absence out of his own pocket. But he still had to return to the office. Casey learned that the top students with black stripes trained in the night class. Today, Henry was expecting to be awarded such a stripe at the ceremony, and he eagerly awaited it. The sensei informed the students that exactly 7 years ago, the great master was mistaken for a bird and accidentally shot in the face during a hiking trip. Rule 11 states, guns are for the weak. The master was the sole owner of the rainbow belt, which he designed and awarded to himself. It was the highest rank in all of karate. Furthermore, the great master possessed a signature secret strike. He killed opponents by piercing their heads with his index finger. Casey received the first rank promotion. Now wearing a yellow belt, Kenneth received a brown belt. But Henry did not receive his award. He spoke up, but the sensei produced a black belt, not a black stripe. He would present it to his most loyal student. Anna hoped he meant her, but alas, the belt went to an Asian man named Thomas. Casey was immensely proud of his new belt, though he couldn't wear it to work. His attempts to fit in with his colleagues remained futile. All Casey thought about was getting back to training as soon as possible. At the grocery store, he only purchased yellow-colored items. In the parking lot, a bearded man dented Casey's car with a door and was rude to him. He didn't care that the weakling had a yellow belt in karate. At home, Casey immediately put on his belt. During the class, he was the only one who couldn't break a wooden board. The sensei doubted the newcomer deserved the yellow belt, but that was no reason to give it up. Casey had to strive to become stronger. Casey finally confessed that he was there because he had been attacked. He was afraid of the dark and other men. The sensei promised to help him, but psychological readiness was key. For example, Casey should listen to metal music, the most aggressive genre, and replace his interest in French culture with German. Casey had to become a man in every respect. The sensei, exceptionally, invited the yellow belt to the night class and presented Casey with a black stripe. In his car, the man played the metal music, and instead of a croissant, he rudely ordered a black coffee at the cafe. Then he snatched a newspaper from an elderly man and began studying vulgar German. The boss asked him to return to work, but instead, Casey punched him in the throat and insulted his wife. Learning what Casey had done, his colleagues offered him friendship. He, however, drove one of them away. He announced to his dachshund that he would no longer pet her. That same night, our hero went to the night class. Henry also showed up, though he lacked a stripe like the others. The sensei immediately called him over and broke the man's arm. The sensei couldn't take away the belt, but he could take away the arm. Henry was no longer allowed to attend the academy. The night class training was much tougher. Casey even knocked out Kenneth's tooth, while Anna fiercely grappled with Thomas. She put the bearded man in a chokehold. He began to tap, but Anna had no intention of releasing her grip. She then brutally smashed the face of her unconscious opponent. After the session, all the men stripped naked and began massaging each other. Casey didn't have a partner, so the sensei directed him to Anna and apologized for him having to endure a massage from a woman. The women's changing room was located in the utility area. Anna gave Casey a piece of advice: you cannot be weak in the night class. Casey went to the sensei to boast about his new accessory. He had custom-made yellow belts, as he couldn't wear his official belt everywhere. Since the minimum factory order was 50 items, he had belts made for all the students. The sensei proudly donned his black belt, which was actually just a regular belt. Due to his crude behavior and poor performance, Casey was fired from his job, and the sensei offered him the position of academy accountant. That night, Casey was awakened by a call from the sensei. He had found the people who attacked his student that night. The villains were supposedly at a bar. A man exited the establishment, and the sensei immediately pointed him out. The instructor ordered Casey to attack the drunken biker. The yellow belt followed and punched him in the stomach. The unfortunate man fell and hit his head on the asphalt. The sensei filmed all of this, supposedly for the record of Casey's growth. Only then did Casey realize that the drunkard hadn't arrived on a motorcycle but on a bicycle. The sensei had lied to him. Upon returning home, Casey found his dachshund near death. She had been severely beaten with fists. They couldn't save the animal, but she fought until the end, and the attacker's blood remained on her fangs. Casey came to Anna's class and intentionally stepped onto the tatami with his shoes on, and he also littered on the mat. The sensei came out. Casey accused the master of killing his dog and told him and his dojo off. The sensei immediately confessed that the beaten man was not a robber, and Casey knew this perfectly well. The student wanted to leave, but the thug reminded him that he had the recording. Casey lunged at the sensei, but he subdued him with one hand. According to him, Casey's nighttime beating was the best thing that had ever happened to the yellow belt, and it helped him become who he always wanted to be. He was still waiting for the student at the night session. In the evening, Casey apologized, and the sensei decided to entrust him with teaching the children's group. Anna was dismissed. She would never receive a black belt anyway. Her femininity was hindering her in karate, and karate was only for men. After the session, Casey was given black clothing. He was led to the garage, where motorcycles were parked. He realized that the karate students were the ones who attacked him. Anna also insisted on going along to keep an eye on Casey. Their mission was to target those in need of help and beat them up. Refusal was not an option, or the sensei would kill him. Anna was about to attack another victim, but the man turned out to be a police officer and shot the girl in the leg. Casey moved in close and hit the cop. He couldn't stop himself and beat him to death. Police sirens sounded, and the bikers fled the crime scene. Tomorrow, Casey would receive a red stripe they were actually awarded for killing a person. Anna revealed that she had killed one of the students. He was higher ranked than her, and she always let him win. Back then, they shared a locker room, and he attacked Anna because he considered her easy prey. But she strangled him with his own belt after torturing him thoroughly. The sensei, however, claimed she had provoked the student. Anna hoped Casey would not return to the dojo. At home, a gift awaited the man, a vicious German shepherd in place of his deceased German dachshund. That night, Casey snuck into the academy and entered the forbidden room. It was there that the compromising videotapes were stored. On that fateful night, Thomas wanted to kill him. The sensei didn't object, but Anna saved him. She claimed to have heard a siren. The tape was labeled Faces of Fists, Part 13. In the morning, the sensei found Henry in the utility room, having hanged himself with his blue belt. He dragged the body to the forbidden room and burned it in the furnace. Judging by appearances, this was far from the first time he had done this. The thug then began cleaning and, once finished, stared at the portrait of the great master. Casey approached him and announced that he intended to kill him. He would be the one to make Leslie stop breathing. Yes, he knew his sensei's name was Leslie, and it sounded even more effeminate than Casey. Leslie tried to buy him off with the black belt, but Casey still challenged him to a death match. The black belt was confident he could easily kill the student, so he immediately agreed. But when they stood opposite each other, Casey simply pulled out a gun and shot Leslie in the head. Casey delivered to pre-written speeches over the body because he couldn't choose the best one. He then inserted his index finger into the hole he had made and now lies to the students, claiming he killed the sensei in a fair fight using the same method as the great master. If anyone disliked this, he would pierce their head with his finger too. Casey then asked all the students to extend their hands. He checked each one and found a bandage on Thomas's hand, which concealed a wound from a dog bite. Casey called over his German shepherd and ordered it to sever Thomas's throat. After that, Casey took out the black belt. He hadn't earned it yet, but Anna absolutely had. She would now be in charge of the dojo and would introduce the students to a new ideology. Casey began teaching the children's group, and next to the great master's photograph, he hung a picture of his dachshund.